And welcome, Eric. Great to have you on our podcast today. Now, you have been the person that I've been trying to get hold of for so long, but glad that I've got you at last. We've met up before and just had an amazing conversation. I think you're going to have an enormous contribution to the people that are watching this call today.
Well, thank you. I hope this is only the second of many more conversations. I enjoyed our last one a lot.
Absolutely, but I've been doing my research on you since, and I've found a little bit of controversy here. So we will be
Mm,
delving into that. Oh, this should be good. So yes,
okay.
just hold on to that thought because yeah, no, we'll come back to that one. So you've been doing this M&A stuff for quite a while. You've got an
Two
extensive amount
years.
of experience. Can you give us a bit of an idea as to what you've been up to, please?
You mean lately? Or
Over your career in
over
the
my
M&A
career?
space.
I'll give you
Yeah,
the Reader's Digest version of my career. It started
great.
in national, international ad agencies in Canada, working on a whole variety of pretty well known clients. Good background in brands and retail and regular corporate marketing, all different kinds. In '94, I left the corporate world and I started a company called Soho Marketing. And Soho Marketing was really, as it sounds, marketing for the small office, home office, which gradually moved up to kind of lower middle market type of business, so the medium to higher end of small business. But it was a full service marketing agency. It gave me a really good chance over a couple of decades to spend a significant amount of time with business owners and to get inside their head, understand what they're thinking, understand what their needs are, to be able to anticipate, what their needs are. And it got to a point toward the end when I started asking the question, are you thinking about selling the business? And it's interesting because oftentimes the answer was, how did you know? Well, you're of a certain age, the business is in a
Mm,
certain place. We've had these conversations. How seriously are you thinking about it? And at that time, in all the business press, they were talking about the quote unquote, silver tsunami, the boomer business owners selling. And the average age for a boomer business owner at that time was probably 50, 55, something like that, maybe 60 at the high end.
mm,
Today, it's closer to 70s, but at that time, what happened was it was predicted that there would be a big sale of businesses, but the people who did the predicting did not understand the mindset of a boomer business owner. So they were not about to sell at 50 or 55 years old and run off and play golf for the rest of their lives. That was not who they were. They were not built to do that. They were entrepreneurs. So as you can see, they've held out as long as they could. And now you're
yeah.
starting to see a little bit more activity in the last few years because those same people that were 55 or 60 are 70 or 75 now. And I got to know them well. I understood what they were thinking. I helped them to understand what their options were, what their choices were, ahead of them, and just slowly evolved into, well, wait a minute, instead of doing marketing services, well, why don't we put an end to that? I've spent a whole career providing marketing services, and why don't I become an intermediary? And why don't I represent sellers and bring buyers to the table and negotiate the deals, which is basically what I do now.
And I do like the way that you say it, represent sellers, not go out
Mhm.
and find sellers.
Well,
You're
sellers
working
tend to come to me.
side by side with them.
Sellers come to me. I have a weekly email that I put out. I have for about 10 years, and it goes to 10,000 plus business owners. And essentially, what happens is that a business owner will raise their hand, and they'll say, typically, what happens is whether it's an email or a phone call, it's always the same. They'll say, "Hey, Eric, I've been getting your emails for years. I think it's time to talk." Now, that doesn't mean that they're ready to sell the business. It just means that they're ready to have a conversation. And I'm very, very open to just having conversations. I'm not interested in trying to convince somebody to do anything. So many of the sellers that we've worked with, I've had a relationship over a period of time. Maybe we talk once a year, I give them some advice, maybe I do a little bit of coaching here and there. But, they'll know when the right time comes. But in the meantime, there's things that they can do to make themselves better suited to a successful sale of their business.
You're just leading this conversation along. Okay, tell me, what are those things that they should be doing?
Well, I tend to divide it into three chunks. There's the personal stuff that a business owner needs to do in terms of getting their head straight, dealing with their spouse, dealing with their partners, dealing with issues, excuse me, dealing with issues that they have to work on for themselves. Then they have to deal with the business itself, company issues, things that happen to do with the business, staff, you know, products, services, finance, operations. There's all kinds of things they can do to improve the value of the business. And then the
Mm.
fourth area is basically dealing with the concept of actually selling the business. So get your act together, get your business act together, understand, what road you're going down in terms of selling a business, and you'll ideally successfully sell
What you didn't mention there, which surprised me, was you didn't mention their future. What are they doing after they sell?
it. It's
And
it's an important element, but it's not a key element, and I'll tell you why.
okay,
I put out a poster several years ago. You can get it on my website, on the warrenbdc.com website under resources. It's titled 75 Things to Do After You Sell Your Business. And I just literally listed 75 different things. So figuring out what you want to do is not really a challenge. What I've found over the last few years, interestingly enough, is owners don't want to go off and play golf for the rest of their lives. They don't want to travel for the rest of their lives. And they sure as hell don't want to be home for the rest of their lives. So, what typically happens is, and this is why I don't worry about it, what typically happens is they're at home for 6 months, maybe a year. They've somehow put together a home office in their basement. Their spouse tends to say to them on a daily basis, are we going here? Are we going there? When can you start getting out of the house? Because I don't want you around anymore. And the owners, they get it out of their system. This whole playing golf and travel and all that stuff, it's very short lived. Here's what they do. In many cases, we've sold businesses and the owner comes back to us with his pot of money and says, okay, I need some action. I want to buy a smaller business. I want to build a portfolio of two or three or four or five companies. I sold my business for $10 million. I'm sitting on $10 million. I don't need to spend it all, but I wouldn't mind buying 3 or 4 million or $2 million companies. And I can oversee them. I can have the fun of being in business. I can take advantage of all my years of experience and expertise without worrying about things on a day-to-day basis. And that's where you're seeing a lot of activity is people jumping back into business. Because if you're a true entrepreneur, a serial entrepreneur, that's what you know. That is what you do. Athletes don't stop playing tennis because they stop being professional, do they?
and domestically, I feel as though you've got video cameras in my house because you know what my wife's
Yeah.
conversations are, and you know this conversation as well. I couldn't retire. What would I do? My mind is
They do the
constantly
kind of
going.
things that you're doing. It's brilliant. And they're giving back to business and giving back to society and staying out of their spouse's hair. It's a great plan. It really is.
Yeah, well, I get plenty of hints, that's for sure.
You're lucky it's just hints.
No, that is all great stuff. That really is. Now, you said small to medium-sized businesses. So just to quantify that, you're in Canada, I'm in Australia. do we have different perspectives as to what that means? What size do you call small to medium size?
We look at typically companies in the $2 to $25 million range. That doesn't mean that we will walk away from something that's more than that. And if the margins are there, then we might look at something a little bit smaller, but only if the margins are really there. But so having companies 25, 35 million or bigger, we get approached, and we're qualified to take care of those things. We have buyers. What's interesting is we have way more buyers that are looking for bigger organizations. So there's no shortage of people that have lots of cash.
Let's talk about that because that really is something that I'm heavily involved with and quite excited by. And that
Mhm.
is, you said that the person might buy three or four smaller companies, roll ups. So buying those silos of dental organizations or physios or osteos and things like that, and then rolling those up to create one of those bigger companies and then sell that.
You want to know what the next roll up's going to be? I'll share
What's
this
that?
with you and your audience. The next roll up's going to be
Okay.
trade schools. Trade schools.
I know so many people that are onto that right now. I really do.
It's the next big
It's
one. You're going to
phenomenal.
read about it everywhere. Trade schools.
Yeah. I know a guy who's actually building university style qualification trade schools in Australia, the US, and New Zealand. So, yes, I have to agree. That is something that is definitely on its way. And with the housing and facilities here in Australia or lack thereof, it's going to be a boom business here in Australia, that's for sure.
I would take
Okay.
a trade school diploma over a BA or, you know, most university courses in a second.
If I was really skilled with this podcast stuff, I'd put uh, harps and tubas and all that on that because that is exactly right. That really is. And funny you should say that because I spent, what, 25 years in corporate, and my son gets so upset with me, my 27-year-old son, because I'd say whenever a resume came in and they said that they've got a master's or an MBA, I said I'd always throw that in the bin first, and then I'd look at the rest of them. He said, "Why would you
Mm.
do that? They've spent so much time." Yes, they've spent so much time in academia not learning. And this podcast is called M&A Profits, Lessons from the Trenches. It's you learn from the trenches. You learn from getting out there and doing it.
It's interesting. I'm the first to actually to defend certain kinds of higher education, and I'll give you an example. I was
Please.
talking to someone recently, and he wanted me to uh, basically take a phone call from somebody who he's applying to for a job. And I said, well, great, but let me talk to him first. And in that conversation, when I understood he has a financial background, in that conversation, I learned that he's not lazy, that he's smart as a whip, that he really understands actually the world of kind of M&A and buying and selling companies. And he got what I would estimate to be way more out of his education than I would have thought, most kids. And so we've given him an intern position in our company because I was
Oh,
just
excellent.
super impressed with him. That's not every kid. That is one kid. So I'm not, kind of down on
Hmm.
everything, but you can tell really quickly.
Well, and I should mention people getting into the M&A space. I had a call last week with someone, a young guy,
Hmm.
and he's been in the M&A space only about 18 months. And we had a conversation just like this, and I said I wouldn't normally get onto a call like this, but I said since you've actually booked the appointment, I always like to be there for people. They've got the time to actually make available, then fine, I'll be there. And we got chatting, and he made this statement, this quote, which don't want to cover it too much in this, but to be honest with you, he said, a few times. And I said, look,
Yeah,
I
no
said, that's
kidding.
just not on. I said, you can't go around saying that. I said, because nobody's going to believe a word you say. But anyway, we got chatting a few times, a bit more on this, and the conversation was a bit rocky, but I was trying to educate this guy. He sent me an email afterwards to thank me for my coaching, my time, and my advice. And I thought, fantastic, because that's what you should do after you meet someone. You always send a follow-up email to say thank you. I
Mhm.
then also, I said I would introduce him to someone else. I got an email back from that other person to say, yes, he'd contacted and thank you for the for the connection.
Mhm.
I also recommended that he go and buy this particular training program as well. And I got an email back to say that he had done so as well. So there was someone that had done the academia, been in for 18 months in the fields, had been totally unsuccessful, but with a little bit of coaching, he'd gone and taken 3 steps. And he then came to me and asked me, he said, would you be able to do some coaching for me? Would you be my coach? I said, well, I said, I'm not really geared up for that. I said, I'm not, that isn't really what I do. But how could I say no to someone that had done everything I'd asked them to do?
Mhm.
He put me in a terrible position. I had to say yes. So we actually start our first coaching session. Today is Tuesday, on Friday. So yeah, he's put me in a terrible position. I've had to go and create a coaching course just because
The
this guy has
debilitating,
taken action.
the most debilitating thing that coaches go through is when people don't do what they suggest they do. So
Yeah.
when you find somebody that actually is willing to listen and execute on what you suggest and get back to you, it's almost a unicorn.
Well, I did the proactive thing. I went and wrote, this is totally off topic, sorry, everyone. I went and wrote up an introductory, week 1, week 2, week 3, and I sent it
Mhm.
off to him on Sunday afternoon. And I get up this morning, because it's only 8:17 here in the morning right now. He's responded back at 12:37 this morning to say, here are my responses to all of that.
Be
So,
serious.
yes, sometimes you do find the right people and the people that are prepared to go out there and be exceptional. And I think that this guy, I gave him a really hard time, but I think he might be that one.
It's nice. It's very nice.
Yes. So he's put me in a terrible position. Now I'm going to have to write up their merger and acquisition profits and coach.
Yeah, or he's done you an incredible favor.
He has.
He's done you an incredible favor. He's got you into that headspace of doing coaching. He's given you a whole new opportunity.
He has. So I'm looking forward to that. I have done a lot of coaching in the past. It
Have
just
you?
wasn't my intention or goal. But
Yeah,
he's put me in a terrible position where he's done everything, so I have to do it. Okay, let's get back to us. So, but
sure.
it's a good story. It really is to see people taking action, and I always like that. So you made a comment in our previous conversation, the 80-20 rule. 20% of effort gives 80% of return.
Hmm. Pareto's rule. It's a well accepted lesson in life, if you will. If you
Well,
ask an
yeah,
average small business owner who has 10 salespeople, and you look at the sales of each of the 10 salespeople, two of them will do 80% of the sales, typically.
okay. I have seen that so many times and seen that to be true so many times. So I ask the people that are watching this right now, go and check yourself and get rid of the ones that aren't in that top 20%. Do yourself a favor, just go and cut them loose and go and find other great people, because that is the case in virtually every organization.
Before you cut them loose, have a heart-to-heart conversation. There may be some in there that are potential stars, and for whatever reason, maybe they didn't get the training, maybe they didn't get the opportunities. Uh, there could be many, many reasons why they haven't shone. You just need to have that conversation, and maybe there's one or two or three or four of the eight that you can actually save and do great things. I mean, what I suggest is people look for more of the one and twos, more of the top 20%. And if
Yeah,
one is already inside and maybe he's selling widgets and he should be selling what's its, then, switch him over. Maybe he's in the customer service department and he could be in sales. Maybe he's in sales and he should be in customer service. Lots of different ways to look at it.
Hmm. The the best example that I've seen of that was someone selling an organization. A friend of mine was brought into an organization and they sold chainsaws and the like wood stuff like that. And they had 7 people around the US that were selling this equipment, and there were just a couple that were doing exceptionally well and some that weren't doing very well at all. And what he found was that people were selling within their state and one state out. This is in America where the states are pretty small, but yes, one state out, but they weren't going that second state out. They weren't
People go
doing the
as close to their
distance.
home as humanly possible.
That's
They
right.
stay
So,
they stay as close to their home as humanly possible.
hmm. So
The
what
other
he
thing
did
they do,
was he adjusted their boundaries.
yeah, for sure. The other thing is that salespeople and company owners tend to think that every customer knows everything that they do and knows everything that they sell. Not the case. I know from personal experience. So, you arm your salespeople with a single piece of paper that identifies everything that your company does. I guarantee you that they will find that their customers had no idea they did all these different things and that they need them to do something. I will also guarantee you that they will find that they're going to a competitor or somebody else to get something because they didn't know you did it. So these are
Absolutely.
little ways to help a sales guy.
Which is why I'm going to have to go and put "and coaching" onto the little
Yeah.
logo now, hey, to let people know. But yes, you're correct, absolutely correct there. And you see that time and time again. And when you talk about taking on a business and getting it ready for sale, that is a key component, is actually getting out there and letting your customers know what else you do and bringing in that extra revenue stream from those existing customers, because customers are hard to get hold of the best of times.
Mm-hmm. And they're basically pre-sold. They just don't know that you make a brown widget instead of just white widgets. It's or you could do something custom. Or I think that oftentimes salespeople are order takers and not salespeople.
Yes, yes, definitely. Okay. Now, customer service, that really is a key item that you have a passion for. Can you tell us about how you see customer service and what makes an exceptional customer service person?
I just did a poll on LinkedIn that where I asked owners whether they thought customer service was important, to the success of their organization. And I think it was something like 75% agreed that it was. Doesn't mean that 75% have great customer service, but people generally understand that it's a key component to the success of any organization. And customer service to me is treating a customer the way you would expect to be treated. It's not real complicated. Give me what you told me you would give me. When you told me you would give it to me, for the price that you told me you would sell it to me for, and make sure that it does what you told me it would do. That's it. It's not really more complicated than that.
Now, life isn't easy. So
Mhm.
sometimes things go wrong and it doesn't do what you want it to do. What do you do then if you're the
You
customer?
accept responsibility immediately. You say, okay, it's, we understand there's a problem with this. And how many companies have people dealt with that blame six other people before they'll accept any kind of responsibility? You immediately accept responsibility. You know what I love about Costco?
Right.
Is you never have a problem giving something back. I buy at Costco with absolute confidence because I have no concern that their customer service isn't going to be anything but great. So if you
Okay.
make widgets and if people generally speaking have great experience with you, you'll get good reviews. People will have good experiences. Um, when when another competitor comes along, people will be reluctant to leave you because they're happy with what you're doing for them, and all you're giving them is what you agreed on. That's it. And if for some strange reason, and these things happen, and you can't deliver on Tuesday, it's going to be a weak Tuesday because you were let down by another supplier, or whatever the reason, call up your customer and say, look, I got to be honest with you. I'm not going to be able to get it to you there for another week. If that's a concern, maybe we can find some way around it. If you can live with it, then that would be great. And I think 9 times out of 10, your customer will say, it's not a problem. Don't worry about it. But thank you for letting me know. Honesty is a
That's just so
powerful
true.
marketing tool.
Yeah,
Honesty is key.
it is. And people admitting something. You can't be right all the time. You can't do things right all the time. But when you
Hmm.
don't, just say so. Sorry, that's it, my fault. And take responsibility. And it does make a huge difference, not just
It's no
to your
different.
customers,
It's
but
no
also to
different.
your employees.
No different than having a good marriage. Sometimes you have to say I was wrong. Sometimes you have to say I dropped the ball. It happens.
I don't have to, by the way. So thanks for that
Yeah.
advice anyway, Eric. I don't have to because I'm always told.
Yeah.
I'm given an assist on that one. Uh, okay, so you mentioned trade schools before.
Mhm.
What verticals do you like?
We find a lot of success with manufacturing, and it's interesting. Typically, we're not, restricted to that. I mean, we have service businesses and other kinds of businesses, but we find that manufacturers in the lower end, 2, 3, 4, 5 million, 8 million, maybe 10 million, they're really good at making what they make, but they're usually not as good at marketing, not as good at operations are what operations are because it's what evolved over 30 or 40 years. So to go into a manufacturing organization and say, with fresh eyes, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? It's not difficult to do that. The best example I can give you right now is, and it's an old story, but consultant comes into a manufacturing organization, and the manufacturing organization has this huge team of people that fix them, usually Asian companies, that fix the mistakes that were made on the line by the workers. And the consultant comes in, and the first thing he says is, "Well, why wouldn't you just fix the problems up here at the beginning instead of having a huge team of people down here?" And the answer
Hmm.
is, well, we've never done it that way before. So, the reality is this: they went from like 30 people fixing mistakes to 2 or 3 people fixing mistakes, and saved themselves what, 27 employees. Now,
I
the big
think
question is, why didn't they do that before? And the answer is because this is the way the company runs, and everybody's afraid of upsetting the apple cart. So you might ask your boss, and his response is, "Well, that's not how we do it." And they might, if they were really, interested in actually doing something, they might ask their boss, and they'd probably hear the same thing, and up it would go, so that nothing ever happens. Sad, but it's true.
It is, and I think if you read the story of Tesla, you will see a similar scenario there where Musk walked into a warehouse and they weren't getting the production of the vehicles out the door. And he walked into this warehouse and there were 32 vehicles just sitting there. And he said, "Why are these not being sold, delivered?" They said, "Oh, there's things wrong with them."
Hmm.
Yeah, they had no people fixing. It was the opposite. They had no people fixing those things, and there was still nobody going back and working on how it occurred in
everybody's
the
in their
first place.
everybody's in their own little fiefdom, their own little world
Yes,
within an organization. So rarely do they step out, and rarely do they have relationships with other members of other departments that would allow them to do that. You would think, a management team would take care of that, and sometimes it does. But if you have a machine that's running, and it's been running like this for 30 years, company's profitable, everybody's happy, um, there's a reluctance to upset the apple cart.
yes. We're running out of time, and I have so many questions for you.
Oh,
But there
do
was
this
another
again.
one,
Sure.
Babo, Babo,
Oh, is what, Babos? Boomer
Babo.
age
Yes.
boomer age business owners. I just made that up.
Because yes, I thought that was a good one, and I've seen that throughout your documentation. Now, I did mention that there was a little bit of controversy that I wanted to bring up,
Mhm.
and that was EBITDA.
Sure.
Now, I've
Mhm.
spoken to you about that, and my notes were EBITDA is the key. And then I read through your stuff on social media, and you've got a problem with EBITDA. What is your issue with EBITDA?
My eyes have been opened as of late to other ways that I think it's still a very valid methodology, but it's certainly not the only methodology. And I think what's happening is, in the M&A world, people are looking for other ways to evaluate things, and they're comfortable keeping EBITDA, but they're also looking at other ways to do it. I mean, I'm not a financial guy, so it's not really my world, but from the perspective of how does the industry run, EBITDA is a very well accepted
Benchmark.
methodology for
Yep.
gauging things. But I think as the world evolves, the world changes, and the business of buying and selling companies change, and companies themselves are changing so much, so different. Technology companies can have a much higher times EBITDA than just the old 4%, 4 times. If it's a sales as a service kind of a software as a service kind of a thing, it could be 8 or 10 times EBITDA. Now that didn't exist
Mm.
20 years ago because the products didn't exist. So I'm just keeping an open mind to everything. I mean, at the end of the
And
day, it's what somebody's willing to pay and what somebody's willing to sell for.
it is. But
Mhm.
I think that the AI side of things is really going to have a big impact on how we do this, how we assess things. You're saying there that you don't think it's the only benchmark that we should be looking at, that we should be looking at others as well. Yes, and I think AI is going to be that thing that's going to allow us to look at the others as well.
EBITDA doesn't tell you that 8 of your 10 management team are leaving tomorrow. That makes a
No.
big difference. I mean, we're dealing with an organization now, and they're coming to market, and their VP of sales just said, "I got to go." Now, it's a really important thing that they don't have a VP of sales, let alone a VP of sales with a huge depth of experience with that particular organization. So all of
Mm.
a sudden, sure, EBITDA is going to be important, but people are going to be looking at that. They're going to be looking at inventory levels, all kinds of things. It's not black or white, I guess is what I'm saying. It's a very gray landscape in terms of evaluating a company.
It is. And I was chatting with someone last week, and I'll make this a quick story, and I wasn't too sure whether they were a scam person or not. And they were in the M&A space. And they were supposed to be interviewing me, but it quickly turned around the other way, which took them by surprise. And he said, I don't think that we're going to fit here. I said, well, he said, you ask too many questions. I said,
Mm,
well, I said, that's sort of what I do. I said, if you look at any due diligence, I said, you're going to have a minimum of 200 questions. And depending on the business, I said, it's going to blow out to 1,000 questions very rapidly. I said, if you
sure.
can't handle my few questions right now, I said, you're right. It's just not going to work out at all.
Well,
But yes, you've got to ask these questions and they've got to be quite spread out for you to understand the whole landscape of a business.
yeah. And my response to them saying you ask too many questions is, what are you hiding?
Uh,
You're obviously hiding
I,
something. There's no question. So you can tell me now, or we can find out later. But you're hiding something.
you were
You just are.
spot on. Yeah. And
Yeah, I've learned
it,
to assess
it,
people pretty quickly.
I think you probably gathered that about myself as well. But yes, it wasn't that that relationship was never going to happen. It just wasn't. And I've made sure that they're marked down. I know who they are and I know the partners they're working with. Stay well clear from
Good,
that point on.
good.
Eric, I just feel that you and I could talk for a lot longer and we could
Well, why don't we
discuss a lot of
schedule
different
something where
subjects.
we have more? Let's schedule something where we maybe stick closer to, the whole M&A world and buying and selling and stuff. And I mean, I've really enjoyed the conversation, but I think you're right. We could do a lot more. So let's reschedule something and let's pick a half a dozen questions and just go at them. Something that
Sounds a
for a
wonderful idea.
seller, something specifically for a seller, and some for a buyer. That would be great. I'd be thrilled to do that.
I'm not going to say no. I'm going to get that in the calendar because that sounds a terrific offer, and I think everyone is going to benefit from that. Thank
Mhm.
you so much, Eric, for your time today. And yeah, we will book that in the calendar.
Yeah, no, we were going to give away a copy of my online system, the Sell Your Business for More system.
We
So,
will figure out how to do that. We will sort that out and
okay.
we will get that happening as well. Thank you again for that. Much appreciated.